Here we're going to be looking at where we issue bonds and then retire them at a loss. And we're going to issue common stock to retire these bonds. And for example here, Corporation A issued $1,500,000 worth of 11% 15-year bonds at 97 or 97% of their par value here. And they were issued here on 4/1/20x1. And then 11 months later here in 3/1/20x2, the bonds with a par value of $600,000 are retired by issuing 20,000 shares of that's $10 par common stock, plus the accrued interest has to be paid here on those bonds that are retired. And the common stock was selling for $31 a share, and interest is payable semi-annually on these bonds here at 4/1 and 10/1 each year here. And Corporation A uses straight line method to amortize any bond discount or premium here. So what we've done here is Corporation A issued these bonds, or $1.5 million worth of bonds, and then 11 months later retire $600,000 worth of those bonds here, the $1.5 million worth of initial issue, by issuing common stock here. And the common stock was selling for $31 a share, and they issued 20,000 shares here. Okay, so that's how they finance their issuing or retirement of these $600,000 worth of bonds. Okay, so the next thing we have to do here is we're going to be using the straight line method here, and we have to determine the bond amortization here on a monthly basis. So first we have to determine the months that we're talking about here. So a total months for their bonds here would be at 15-year bonds here, 12 months per year, so we have a total of 180 months here that have to be amortized. So the actual amortizing of the bonds here that were issued, and that would be for the 11 months after the issue date here. So the bonds were issued here on 4/1/20x1, and then the portion was retired here on 3/1/20x2. So we're talking about 9 months here in 20x1, from 4/1 through 12/31, the end of the year here, and for 3/1 and retired here in 3/1/20x2, we're talking about 2 months from the January 1st through the beginning of March here of 3/1. So we talk about 2 months. So we have total 11 months here, 9 months in 20x1 and 2 months here in 20x2. So total 11 months that would have to been amortized up to the retirement date here of those bonds. So the total amount of amortization would have been 180 months less the 11 months that was amortized. So we got 169 months here, the difference that would months that remain after the retirement of those $600,000 worth of bonds. Those would be the amount of amortization after the retirement here on 3/1/20x2. Okay, so let's go down, and we have to calculate. We're going to be determining a loss here on the redemption. We can go down and look at that right now. So we're going to have a loss here, but how do we calculate that? Okay, so just remember, our last payment date here was on 10/1 x1 here, the last payment date, interest payment date on those bonds here, and then on 3/1/x2 they were retired here. So we have 5 months of accrued interest on those bonds. So first we have to determine here our reacquisition price, plus we have to pay the accrued interest. So our reacquisition price was simply the 20,000 shares of common stock issued here at $31, or the market value, not its par value, but its market value here. So that is what the price that we're paying here on for those bonds is the issue price here on that stock at its market price here, for a total of $620,000. Then our accrued interest. Well, we had $600,000 on the bonds here retired at 11% interest rate, and there was 5 months here that we calculated, about 5 months of accrued interest. So that amount is $27,500. So the total reacquisition price would be the stock price here, $620,000, plus the accrued interest here on the bonds, $27,500. So we have a total reacquisition price here, cost of $647,500. Now, the other thing, next point here is we have to determine the unamortized discount on the retired bonds. Again, remember the discount here was $45,000, or 3% here of $1.5 million face amount or par value of those bonds. That would equal $45,000 based on a 97% price here, discount on those bonds. And so we got $45,000 here of the discount times the portion of bonds that are being retired, the $600,000 divided by the total amount here of $1.5 million. And then we've got this the retired bond, the fraction of the retired bonds, or the remaining amortization here. That was at 169 months remaining divided by total here of 180 months. So take all those fractional amounts here and the bonds being retired, the remaining months to be amortized here times the discount. You're going to come up with an unamortized discount on the $600,000 of retired bonds here of $16,900. And then again, we determine their accrued interest on the retired bonds. That was, again, we calculated that up above here, 600,000, 11% here, and there was 5 months of accrued interest here for $27,500. Now, next to determine our loss here on the redemption. So we take our reacquisition price plus our accrued interest. Remember, we calculated that to be $647,500 up here. Now we have to compare that to the net, or we have to subtract out the net carrying value of the bonds redeemed here. So the par value of the redeemed bonds, $600,000, and then the unamortized discount is a reduction here to the par value for $16,900 that we calculated up here. So the net amount, our carrying value of bonds here, $583,100. Then we'd have to subtract out our accrued interest. It was included up here. We have to subtract it out down here. So difference here, net amount here between the reacquisition price here plus our net here for our carrying value and then the accrued interest, the difference is $36,900. And that's a loss here in redemption. So what we mean by the loss here is just in these terms here. So we paid more. We paid $647,500 here to reacquire those bonds here plus accrued interest here. And it's paid more here than the carrying value. The carrying value plus the accrued interest here is $610,600. So that's how we got our loss here. Paid more than the carrying value. Okay, so next let's go up and look at how we'd record this. Okay, what we're first off for our depreciation per month on a straight line basis. So we had the $1,500,000 at 97% here. That equals $1,455,000. That's the amount that those bonds here were worth here after the discount here of 3% essentially. So we got the difference between $1,500,000 and $1,455,000 gives us that $45,000 discount here, and divide that by the total months to be amortized, 180 million. So we're talking about $250 per month here for our amortization. And then remember the bond interest payments dates here are on 4/1 and 10/1 each year here. Okay, so let's go and look at how we'd record this. And what I'm going to first look at is just at the issue and then at the retirement, and then the other things are other items that we have to look at is the interest expense on itself here. So at the issue date here, cash, we would have received $1,455,000 based on that 97% par value that we're going to receive here of the $1,500,000 issued here, or face value of those bonds. So that gives us our cash amount here, and then our bonds payable, a liability on our balance sheet, we would have set that up at the par value here of $1,500,000 on those bonds, and then we would have set up this contra account here on our balance sheet, debit that here for $45,000, which reduces the bonds payable. Okay, so we got the issue date here. That our discount here we recognized here as a contra to our bonds payable, and we've got our cash amount that we received here. Okay, now let's just go and we'll do a quick cursor overview here of the retirement date here. So at the retirement date, what we're doing is we're going to reduce our bond liability here, bonds payable, by the par value that we're retiring here, $600,000, and then the discount here, contra account again to the on 3/1x2. Again, this was here on 3/1x2. That was the retirement date here. So our discount here to our bonds payable on 3/1x2, we'd reduce that discount amount here by $16,900. That was the calculation that we made here for the unamortized discount or those retired bonds. All right, so we've taken care of our bond discount. Now let's go and we'll look at on our equity section here on our common stock. So we would have on 3/1x2 here, we would have credited or increased our common stock at its $10 par value times the $20 per share, or 20,000 shares here for $200,000. Common stock issued here in 3/1x2. Again, equity on our balance sheet here, and then the additional amount here would go into additional paid-in capital here on our balance sheet here to our common stock account. That was the $31 market price here less the $10 par value that we recorded here times the 20,000 shares. So again, our additional paid-in capital, we would credit that here for $420,000. Okay, we've taken care of our common stock here. Okay, now let's go up here on our income statement. Again here on 31X2. This is where we would have recorded this loss on redemption here of this $600,000 worth of bonds retired on our income statement again here. So that was the amount we calculated here of that loss, $36,900. That calculation we made earlier. So debit or increase our loss here on the redemption on our income statement for $36,900. Okay, so we've taken care of the issue date here and the retirement date. Well, we've got some other. Now let's just go and look at our interest calculations here. So just bear with me here if you're interested in this. So on our cash account here on 10/1, that first interest payment date, or the interest payment date for the first 6 months here from 4/1 here to 10/1, we would have reduced our cash account here for $82,500. Simply the $1.5 million times 11% interest here for 6 months or 6/12ths of a year here, so that we get $82,500. And then on the retirement date here, 31X2, we would have had accrued interest that we had to pay. We calculated that was a $600,000, 11% here for 5 months of the year here, 5/12ths of the year. That gives us $27,500. Okay, so those are two cash outflows here on the 10/1 interest payment date here, 10/1X1, and then on the retirement date here for the $600,000. The 10/1X1 here was for the full amount here, $1,500,000 at that 11% interest for that half a year here. And then on 3/1, remember the $27,500 was for that retired amount, or the $600,000 we're retiring here that was out due here, accrued for 5 months. Okay, so that we have taken care of here. And now there's some balancing entries that we have regarding here this discount. So that would have been amortized down here on 10/1X1. We would have reduced it here by $1,500, and we'll look at that here. So that was simply those 6 months here. The $250 per month here amortization over 6 months is equal to $1,500. And then if let's just go and look at this real quick here. So if we take our discount here, credit amount here of our discount of $1,500 plus the cash amount credit here of $82,500 dollars here that we actually paid, that balances with the interest expense here on our income statement of $84,000 here on 10/1X1. So our interest expense here, or it's increased here by the amount that we're amortizing our discount, and based on the actual cash payment that we're making here. So cash payment $82,500 credit plus the discount here amortized of $1,500 credit amount here balances with the debit or interest expense here of $84,000. Now at the end of the year here, 12/31X1, this is where we have accrued some interest here, because the actual payment is until 3/1 each year here, but we have to recognize the interest expense between the payment, the last payment date here of 10/1 and the end of the year here, 12/31. So we've got 3 months sitting here, and that would have been $250 per month amortizing over 3/1, 10/1 through the end of the year here. So that would be $750 here, and then credit or reduce our discount here by $750 here, and then we would have set up a payable here, just go not to confuse things, 12/31X1, we would have set up a payable here, $41,250. That was simply the $1.5 million times 11%, and that was for a half a year here, and it was only for 3 months. Or the 11% was, and we have a half a year here plus only three of the 6 months here. So we got that multiplies up to $41,250. So we'd recognize interest expense on our income statement here at $42,000. Simply the $750 here amortized amount of reduction to our discount here plus the interest payable. We got to set up that interest payable as a liability here on our balance sheet here for 12/31X1 here for $41,250 here. All right, so we've taken care of that here, and then again at the end of the last amortization here on 31X2 here, I'm showing that here. So we had at the retirement date, I have $200. Simply that was $250 per month amortized over 2 months, and then that's only based on the percentage that we're retiring. 600,000 over the 1.5 million here, 6/15, and that gives us $200 here, a discount that we had to amortize. So we've taken care of that. Now, so we credit or reduce our discount here by $200, and then we had the our interest expense. We're going to recognize $11,200 here, and I'm looking for all my numbers here but let's just go back and we'll just look at this $11,200 here. So what we've done here is interest expense. That's $6 million here times 11% over for 2 months, or 2 months of the year here. So we got the $11,000 here interest expense plus the $200 here of the amortized amount, $11,200 here. And then what we have is a balancing account here, and this can be a bit confusing, but just look at you can just go back and trace through the numbers here. So we reduce our interest payable by that by $16,500 here. So what we've done here is we had to come up with this balancing account here. I'm not going to go through all these numbers on 3120x2 here. So we have the $200 here, $11,200 here, the balancing here of $16,200 here, and then we had the actual cash that we had to pay. We'll go back here and show that here, $27,500. That was that accrued interest here that we're paying here, $27,500. That was the $600,000, 11% over 5 months. So just looking at these A numbers here. So we have cash here of $27,500 that was paid out here, and that's divided up here between reduction on our interest payable here, debit that here for $16,500, and then the other account here would be again that discount here at $200, and then we would debit here our interest expense for $11,200 that we calculated. So this interest payable here is simply a balancing account here. Not to confuse things, but you can go through the numbers here and see what we're talking about. So our interest expense here was increased here by the amount of discount based on our cash payment here. And then just to review here, our loss on redemption, that was at the end here. That was on 31x1 here, and that was based on the market value of the common stock here versus the cost here, our redemption cost based on our bonds that we're retiring here. All right, so that covers that. Our bond issued and retired here at a loss, and we exchange common stock, or what we got for the common stock, we use that to retire the bonds.